I built this rig around my Stomp XL, and it prompted some questions that I was totally expecting. I even joked with a friend. I said, this feels like a Helix LT with extra steps. You know, it's got an extra foot switch, a dedicated expression, a looper, which the LT has an extra DSP chip for. I'd have no problem fitting that on every single preset if I wanted it. An extra foot switch for a boost I could use, you know, the XLR and the ground lift. And I just thought that was a great opportunity, a prompt to create a video just based on some creative kind of workarounds and tricks we can use to get much more out of a single preset on the smaller Stomp devices, which, if you don't know, only has one DSP chip as compared to the LT, the Floor, and the rack versions, which have two. The fact is, I built this because I have the XL. I've really had no desire to own one of the larger Helixes. I've been completely happy with the small ones. And it's still much smaller than an LT. It's still cheaper than an LT would be if price was a factor that I'd considered. And I do have that huge board that I built a few years ago around the original Stomp, which has tactile knobs for different effects. And, you know, I can create a very unique sound on the fly very quickly. Since I finished the rig, I've had a very full 2 weeks. I used it on a festival stage like the day after I finished it. I played an orchestra gig with Bernadette Peters, which was really cool. I used it in a small venue. I used it at a church event last night, which is the preset that I'm going to show in this video, since it's a very DSP heavy preset. And I have another orchestra gig coming up this weekend that I have to use bass guitar, classical, and steel string acoustic for. So it's just been working out really well. Whatever instrument I throw at it, as long as the presets are level matched and everything, it's just been really reliable. So let's get into the preset, and I'll show you a few tricks you can use yourself. So first things first, I just want to walk you through the preset just so you can see what we're working with here. It is a preset that I've built for the CCW Christian worship genre. I don't care what your thoughts are on that. It's a guitar sound. It's a really useful guitar sound that you can definitely find in pop music. So I'm just going to walk you through this. Basically, I have a compressor. I have a Klon style overdrive. I have an AC30 style amp. I have an always on delay. I'll get to that in a second. I have a secondary time-based delay with the tap tempo. I have a reverb that I can toggle between two different sounds. That's another tip we'll get into. And then a secondary reverb, and then an extra modulation. At this point, I've run out of foot switches, but there's a cool thing you can do with the Stomp to be able to access that still. So to get into the dry sound of the preset, the first thing I would like to suggest is that you commit to using Footswitch mode on the smaller units versus snapshots. And this is because on the original Stomp, we only have 3 snapshots. On the Stomp XL, we have 4, but that's still not very much when you're trying to get a lot of different sounds out of a single preset. So let's call this my dry sound. This is with no effects engaged, no Klon overdrive, no compressor, whatever. This is just, again, clean is relative. This has a little bit of overdrive, but for this genre, this sound, let's call this my clean sound. We have a compressed sound. That's on Footswitch 1. We'll turn that off. Then we have the Klon overdrive. Then I set up with the amp block here some parameter adjustments for 2 different overdrives. So that's all by themselves. Now we can start stacking them and create combinations, right? So that was already 4 sounds. That's 4 snapshots, right? If we want to, we can have the compressor and the Klon together. We can have the Klon and the amp overdrive. We can have the amp overdrive and the compressor. Plus the Klon, all 3. So you can see that already there's a lot of different sounds to be had just by using Footswitch mode. Let's get into the parameters. I mentioned it briefly here. For the amp block, that's something that's really useful. You just find 2 sounds you like and you assign it to a parameter adjustment. I like to use this for reverb, and for this I'm going to turn off my always on delay. I'm using the shimmer verb block for this, and if you want much more detailed info, on the last tip I have a full video from a few years ago. There's no facial hair yet. For this tip, I also have a full video on assigning parameter adjustments to a foot switch control on the Helix. So maybe check that out if you want to. I'll have links in the description if you want to watch it after this video too. As I make this video, I apologize. It seems like there's some sort of, I think I have a bad XLR cable here. I'm going to trash that after this. But to get into this bit, essentially we have two different sounds out of a single reverb block. A lot of the time guitarists or anyone really likes to have, call it a comfort reverb, makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, right? Helps your rhythm parts sound a little bit bigger. And for this, I'm just kind of going with a generic kind of hall sound. Though I am using the shimmer block here. Check it out, by the way, if you didn't realize this. The shimmer block is essentially a dynamic hall, if you recognize all these controls in the bottom section here, just with a shimmer, a pitch shifting effect after the reverb. That's what shimmer is, and it seems like they're just using the dynamic hall effect that they already had in there for the shimmer sound. So the way I've set it up is, this is my always on reverb sound. And then if I want to switch to a shimmer sound, I found a bunch of settings that I like. I took a screenshot and I referenced it as I set up the Footswitch parameters. And that's the sound for that. It works great for swells and stuff. So my tip would be just to experiment with setting up a parameter change on a Footswitch. It can be very detailed. You can see there's a ton of parameter adjustments in this single preset. So all these ones for Footswitch 5 are what's affecting the sound there. So all these ones on Footswitch 5 is what's affecting that reverb block. Okay, so, and again, just general tips here is that for a more generic sound, keep the decay lower, keep the mix lower, keep the sound a little bit brighter. And as you switch to a more dramatic sound, make the sound maybe a little bit more dark with more diffusion, so it gets rid of some of the high end a little bit, some of like the early reflections. Engage more damping if you want. And then also raise the mix, raise the decay, and in this case, raise the feedback. There seems to be some sort of delay thing going on with the shimmer effect. I also wanted to mention that you can do this with delay. For this kind of sound, I like having an always-on delay. It's just very much in the background. You don't even notice it when you're playing, but it makes your guitar sound a little bit bigger. And I could do this with a single delay block if I wanted to. The downside here is that since I'm using a time-based delay for this, is that I can't switch between note syncing to a quarter note or, you know, some sort of different time value versus milliseconds. I like my my always-on delay to be set at a certain value regardless of the tempo. And then obviously the time-based delay has to be synced up with the Footswitch to a quarter note value. Here's another quick tip. I won't count this one, but I think it's relevant, although it's not directly Helix related. If you're someone that needs two distinct subdivisions for a single song, and you don't want to waste two different blocks on setting that up, of course you could assign a Footswitch to a parameter change here to set the different subdivision if you wanted to, but then you're wasting a Footswitch. What you can do is just get really good at your subdivisions. So if you need a dotted eighth on the verse and a quarter on the chorus, it's very simple. You know, just pick the quarter note delay there, leave it there, and your delay. There's the quarter note delay. If you know your dotted eighth subdivision, that would be dun, 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 dun. So there's your dotted eighth, and you can find that, again, just with tapping in the correct subdivision with your foot and just leaving it on quarter note subdivision. Now, to get into the next bit, I'm going to switch here. I'm just going to show you the stomp for a second. I've got an extra reverb set up on Footswitch 6, and I've called it the cloud reverb because it's kind of emulating the Strymon cloud algorithm that's really popular in that genre. Some might argue it kind of defined the sound of the guitar in that genre. And it's a nice sound to have. However, if I ever needed to combine it with the time-based effect, the tap tempo delay, it just becomes overwhelming. It's way too much. So what I've done is that I've set up some parameter adjustments here. So as I turn on the cloud verb, I've called it. Now when I turn on the tap tempo delay, you'll see it light up here. There's also some parameter adjustments happening. So I'm lowering the mix a little bit. I'm actually boosting the decay. I'm lowering the pre-delay, and I'm adjusting some stuff here with modulation just to get a slightly better sound that doesn't really conflict. That doesn't create a guitar tone that's all reverb or all delay, and it's not totally washing out in the mix. Right? That still has that distinct time-based delay, but there's still plenty of dry guitar in the mix too. So here's another one coming up, is that in this genre, it's really important to have a volume pedal. I love having a volume pedal at all times for reasons. Specifically, I like having a volume pedal after my overdrive so I can still have a really intense sound, just at a slightly lower volume called a master volume control versus the volume on your guitar, just kind of controlling the amount of overdrive. But when you have a volume after your overdrives, then you can actually affect volume rather than gain. So you can see there's not room here for a volume block. And this isn't anything crazy. It's pretty simple to set up the expression to work on a different parameter. So the way I've done it is that I've set up an expression here to control the level parameter in an always on block. In this case, it's the cabinet in the amp and cabinet combo block. So it sweeps between 0 dB and -18. The reason I chose that and not 0 is because if you had chosen 0, then the minute that you touch that expression and it gets 10% that way, you're completely gone in the mix. So set a more reasonable value. Yeah, at the bottom range, it's going to be a little bit audible still if you need to unplug your instrument, or if it's really quiet and you strum a chord, the audience might hear that chord a little bit, but you could also work in your volume knob on your guitar if you needed to in that situation. So that's generally what I'm doing on the Stomp XL for volume control. It just, in my opinion, doesn't make sense to use the normal volume block because it wastes one when you could achieve the same thing with a parameter adjustment. And just to throw in an extra thing here, you can do the same thing with a Footswitch if you want to assign a boost to a Footswitch. Of course, you don't need to use an overdrive or an actual boost block. Just assign a parameter adjustment on a level parameter of literally any block that is always on. You could even do it in the output block if you want. I like to leave that untouched for leveling reasons when I need to level presets. But what I've done is I've just selected the shim reverb, which, like I said, is always on, and then Footswitch 7, which is my external controller here, all the way on the side. That is what I use for my boost. You can see it toggles between 0 decibels and positive plus 3.5 decibels. That's my solo boost. The fifth and final tip here has to do with what do you do when you run out of Footswitches? You have more effects here than you have Footswitches capable of controlling them. There's a really cool thing you can do with the Helix. When I load this preset in, it's no accident that it defaults to the modulation page. If I were to finish making this preset and I'm on the amp block page and I save it, when I reload this preset, when I come back to it, it's going to pull up that amp block. But what I want to do is select the effect that I don't really need to use that often, but it's nice to have if I need it. And pull that up on the screen, save the preset. Now what happens is that when you need to access it, and I know you're not going to be able to see this real well, just find the home button. So it says view, it's got the picture of the house on it. You press that button, and now your topmost knob here is your bypass for that effect. You can see on the screen, it's toggling on and off. So that becomes a Footswitch controller. You should know that this knob is hard mounted to the plastic circuit board, so do not put pressure on that thing. It's not bad at all. You could do it with your foot if you want to, but every time I've needed, I just bend down and press it with my finger, especially with this music. You play a chord and hold it for 2 measures. It's pretty simple. So that's generally just the tips I have for setting up and making the most use out of the Stomp XL. So that's the video. That's all I have for you. If you enjoyed it, if it was useful, and I hope it was, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I have almost 80 Helix tutorials, can you believe it, up on this page that I've been producing the last few years. There's a lot of presets you can try out from my website. There's some free ones. There's also my huge paid bundle, and then some smaller packages like the one that I mentioned the preset in this video is from. So thanks for watching. Take care, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.